Every now and then, a player comes out of the woodworks and just has a remarkable season. Steve Alexander, who's that player been for you?
For me, it's Bam Adebayo. And he's not a huge surprise to us because Rotoworld was super high on him coming into draft season. He's lived up to the hype. He has 3 triple-doubles this year. Kawhi Leonard and Damian Lillard have 1 for their career.
So both career first, yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. And Bam Adebayo goes out and wins the skills challenge, hitting 3-pointers, which he doesn't do in the regular season. But, I mean, the guy is averaging 16 points, 10 boards, 5 assists, 1 rebound, or 1 steal and 1 block. And those 5 assists, I mean, a lot of times he's had 8, 9, 7 assists in a game. Flirting with triple doubles, I just think he's been a blast to watch. And if any player that we were high on has lived up to the hype this year, it's been Bam.
Totally agree. And I think the assist has been the coolest part to watch in terms of facilitating the offense and using him in the high post. But I'm going to go with it as far as my most surprising player, the player that cleared out of Miami to make room for Bam Adebayo, and that's Hassan Whiteside. Whiteside was in the doghouse for Eric Spoelstra in Miami, got a new lease on life in Portland, and I was really high on him in the preseason, and fortunately so. I think he's really more than exceeded expectations. He ranks 3rd in the league in rebounds per game, over 14 a night, 7th in field goal percentage, 61%, and he leads the league in blocks at 3 swats per game. In 9 category formats, this guy's up to 7th overall, which is, even for me, obviously I had him, I think I had him a 3rd or 4th round value, but for him to exceed expectations to that extent has really been somewhat shocking.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with that. I mean, I had him even a couple rounds lower than you, I think, 5, 6, and he was falling lower than that. You could get him at 80, 90 sometimes because people just
discount buy.
Yeah, people didn't have faith in him. But you're right, top 10 all season long. Amazing. It's unbelievable. And even with Yusuf Nurkic coming back, he's probably going to have limited minutes. I'm not too worried about it. I'm pretty sure a Rotoworld news blurb recently said that Whiteside's not expected to lose his starting job. So Nurk seems, not much of a threat for Whiteside.
I'm with you. And as an aside on Nurk, I'm not, even when Nurk does come back, assuming he comes back healthy, they're going to limit his minutes. They're going to keep him at him back-to-back. So I'm low on Nurk, and I'm definitely a hold on Whiteside.
My only question about Whiteside is if he's playing so well and Dame Lillard's playing so well and C.J. McCollum's good and Trevor Ariza and Carmelo are both playing well, why are the Blazers not better than they are?
I think Whiteside's one of those, real guys that epitomizes better fantasy player than reality player, because he gives up a lot of points on the other end. Even though he leads the league in blocks, he gambles for blocks and is out of position defensively from time to time.
Tommy said it, plus a lack of depth. The Blazers just don't have enough.
Injuries, Zach Collins going down hurt him.
And I'm going to go, my only gripe with you, Steven, is you said Bam wasn't a surprise to us, and he wasn't a surprise to anyone who read the Rotoworld draft guide, because we had him really, really high. I went the opposite direction with a guy that we had nowhere near fantasy value, and that is Devonte Graham, who only right at the end of the preseason really started to get legitimate hype. He's cooled off considerably. He was red hot early, and I was worried about that, because when you watch a guy average 12 3-pointers a game, night after night after night, you're like, surely the NBA scouting reports will catch up with this. And sure enough, they have. They push him at the line. They're not going to let him get those easy shots coming off screens. They're forcing him to drive, and he's been really inefficient finishing in the paint. He doesn't really have a floater. So that's taken a huge toll on his efficiency, his field goal percentage, and so forth. But another guy, if you told me on draft day he was going to be top 75 at the All-Star break, absolutely, I'd take him, because he was he was a flyer pick, if that. Most people got him off the waiver wire.
Yeah, 100%. If we're going to nitpick, the field goal percentage really is a killer, because he takes a ton of shots, too. So it's not like a guy that shoots under 40% but only takes 7 or 8 shots a night.
But he's 7th in the league in assists, right?
Absolutely. His assists have been huge. And to Ryan's point, he wasn't even a guy we were considering,
because with the assists, Terry Rozier came in. Everyone thought this is going to be the guy, target him. Graham wasn't even on the radar.
And we were talking about Malik Monk.
Yeah.
We were not talking about
Dwayne
we were
Bacon.
talking about Malik Monk and Dwayne Bacon. And if I had to choose a waiver wire pickup of the year right now, it'd be Devonte Graham.
100%. And we'll see if he can keep it going forward. But his combinations of threes and assists have been huge, especially in points leagues.
Unfortunately, on every fantasy team, we have that one player where we really wish we wouldn't have drafted him. Ryan Canals, who has that player been for you?
Well, at the risk of triggering Tommy in particular, and probably Steve, I got to go with Mitchel Robinson, who was a top 15 guy the final 2 months of last season. His role seemingly hadn't changed that much. Why wouldn't he just slot right back into that dominant field goal percentage and block guy that he was, grabbing tons of rebounds? but it just hasn't happened. We saw Fizdale playing Taj Gibson over him, and then there was a coaching change in New York, and we thought maybe this was the moment when Mitch Rob breaks out. And instead, Mike Miller has done the exact same thing. He's limiting him to 18 minutes a game off the bench. It's extremely frustrating. Part of it is Robinson not getting out of his own way. He's very foul prone. He talked over the summer about not chasing blocks, keeping his hands down at times, being vertical, all the talking points. Hasn't happened on the court. So I'll throw it to Tommy. Why has Mitchel Robinson been so disappointing?
I'm going to take a deep breath, relax, try not. No. Listen, if you're looking for what has gone wrong, the answer as always is Knicks. Let's start there. They brought in Taj Gibson.
It's a New York problem.
They brought in Taj Gibson. They brought in Bobby Portis.
17 power forwards.
A lot of power forwards, and just they didn't quite round out the roster as well. But to Ryan's point, it wasn't like they brought in Karl Anthony Towns or something, Shaq in his prime, a dominant center. So we assumed that Mitchell Robinson would get all the playing time he would. Ryan pointed out a couple of the individual issues that he's had, and he hasn't developed his game. He talked about working on a three-point shot or at least a perimeter jumper. Has taken one shot outside the paint this entire season.
That's an incredible stat, by the way.
I mean,
one shot.
It's ridiculous. So teams are daring to shoot a 15-footer, and he shoots around 60-70% from the free throw line, so you expect him to do it, but just hasn't done it. So, yes, extremely frustrating. I know you feel my pain on the Mitch Rob burn.
Well, you and I sat in this very room and talked about our love for Mitch Rob over the summer, and I drafted him ridiculously high in a couple early drafts, and I cooled off a little bit by the time the real thing got here, but I still own him in too many places. A couple things that you have to wonder about Mitchell Robinson is his work ethic an issue? Is that why the Knicks are not going all in on him? Now, not being able to stay out of his own way is also an issue because he's always in foul trouble when he does play minutes. But you have to wonder if there's something going on that the Knicks have soured on him a little bit. Another thing that concerns me is he was the glaring absence from the Rising Stars game. And he was sitting at home what happened? What is going on? I should be there. And what is that going to do to his confidence?
Well, maybe they'll wake him up. Who's another bust that obviously we kind of all agree on him being an obvious bust? But, Steve, do you have anyone else?
Well, I did not draft this guy anywhere, even though he's from my hometown of Indianapolis, Indiana. George Hill, who was famously traded for Kawhi Leonard straight up by the Pacers. Yeah, Kawhi Leonard. Mike Conley for the Utah Jazz has just been really bad. He's either been injured or struggling or ruining the life of Joe Ingles and his owners.
Yes.
It's dude, why? He said to the press, I don't feel comfortable playing with some of these guys. I was more comfortable in Memphis. It's just a bad fit. And I don't know why, but he's been a disaster.
Yeah, just in terms of his on-court production, the Jazz have outscored opponents by 10.5 points per 100 possessions with Royce O'Neal on the floor. They've been outscored by over 5 points per 100 possessions with Mike Conley on the floor. So, yes, I agree with you. I was high on Mike Conley coming in. I've been burned. But just, circling back to Mitch Rob for a second and also Mike Conley, there is some buy low value here for leagues that are still, haven't approached their playoffs, that the trade deadline's still available. Conley started the last 4 games, averaged over 20 points a game. Playing better. He couldn't play much worse, right? So he's playing a little bit better. And Mitch Robinson, that same mode. He has nowhere to go but up. Knicks are finally probably going to admit that they're out of the playoff competition. So maybe they'll get him a little more minutes second half.
Well, before we go to Ryan, my point to Mitch Robinson is, I've been saying it all year. Yeah. Hey, next week he's going to turn around. Next week you got to stick with him for the second half. It's coming. I still kind of feel that way. I'm still not giving up on him.
Right.
But we're running out of time.
Yeah. No, I was just wondering about the buy low aspect and whether you had another guy who was a bust but might get better, or are we just going pure garbage?
For my biggest bust, I went with Otto Porter. I had him as a top 40-ish guy coming into the season, and the stats kind of supported it. Had been top 50-ish the last 2 or 3 years in Washington prior to his trade to Chicago. Over the final 2 months of last season, averaged 17.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, 2.6 threes, 1.2 steals, less than 2 turnovers. He's kind of a 9-category darling, always has been. This season has been a total train wreck. Appeared just in 9 games, has been sidelined since early November. It sounds like, due to that broken left foot, it sounds like he's on his way back and could start practicing. But I'm out on Porter. I've been burned enough.
Not
this
a buy low for me either.
I'm gonna steer clear.
I was down on him early this year. I'm thankful for that.
Yes.
Injury-prone veteran on a bad team, that's always a safe bet to stay away from.
Stay away. Yeah, coach seemed pretty excited. Like after the All-Star break, he said they could come back to practice. So
we'll see again. But you know, if a girl cheats on you so many times, you just gotta
you got to drop it.
You gotta drop it, right?
And with that, if you want more Hoops on News on the go, check out Rotoworld Fantasy Basketball Podcast 3 times a week for the latest news, waiver advice, DFS strategy, and more. Go to rotoworld.com/NBA podcast or wherever podcasts are available.